Pledge Music blockchain music project. So I'm just going to be asking him some questions. I'll give him the floor to share. He's got a lot of knowledge and insight about technology, about music. He's an artist himself, and then obviously if you guys have any questions, feel free to ask them, and that's pretty much it. And then after this, we've got our technology panel, because that would flow in very nicely. Digital meltdown to digital get down. And then we've got 2 more panels after that, and then it's party time. So thank you guys for being here. Thank you, Benji, for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
So I'm going to read a brief piece of your bio, and then I'll let you go from there. So as most of you know him from Pledge Music, he's also the founder of Blockchain Music Project, and he uses his dual background in technology and music to advise a wide range of tech and music companies on how to bridge the divide between their industries. His work is rooted in a belief that democratizing power of the internet, and he always goes with, if you guys follow him on Instagram or Facebook, he always goes with loving your work. And that was really one of the main reasons. I met him briefly last year at CD Baby Music Conference, and following you on social media, that was one of the main reasons I really wanted to have you here, because I think your mindset and the message you put out on social media really fits in perfectly with what we're doing here this weekend.
Thank you.
So
you have to tolerate sickeningly beautiful pictures of my daughter as well. So
not a bad thing. So can you give us some background on how you got started in this industry? Because, like I said, most of you know, we know you as like the Pledge Music guy, but you had told me you also play music yourself.
Yeah, so when I've been playing guitar, piano, voice since I was a kid, and I'm the son of 3 managers. My mother, my father, my stepfather all managed bands. So my mom had her own label back in the day. My stepfather was a very successful publisher. My father managed metal bands in the 80s. And so when I was 9, I was on tour with Def Leppard in '83 in Pyromania tour. And then before that, my dad was in kind of scratchy country bands. One of them was called the Hank Wangford and the Lonesome Cowboys. That's the wrong word. A fantastic independent country. They had a hit called Cowboys Stay On Longer. And you name it.
Wow.
So what was cool about all this was it was I literally lived in the back of a tour bus of some kind of description right the way through till my teenage years, and then I started my own bands and did that. And effectively just took the independent mindset, which was that, I'm a big fan of the writer and artist William Blake, who said if I must create my own system or be enslaved by another man's. And so effectively, when I couldn't get a record deal, I was like, when I start a record label. So just did that. When I couldn't get someone to make my CDs, I made my CDs. And Derek Sivers at CD Baby was a big inspiration in the early days, because he was like, sell CDs on the internet. And I was telling you before, but everything that I've ever done in the technology side has always, hung on one question. How do you get an artist or a songwriter paid faster and more? And if you just take that into everything that you do, whether it's building a platform or a technology, I think you're on the right track. And so I was telling you that, like in 2001, I sold the one house I ever owned, and put all the money into making an album and going on tour. And I wound up at Dogfish Head Brewery down the street here on like a Wednesday night, doing the drummer was doing the sound, guitarist was hammered before we started. Terrible show. I remember that we ended our set and he's like, well, that was great, thanks. And the next hour will begin. And we're like, next hour? What are you talking about? But I guess what really changed it was my mom was a fierce entrepreneur, like all her life. And she was, she came up as a woman in the music industry. She worked for Seymour Stein, Clive Davis, Lucian Grange. She knew all these people growing up. And so she experienced the adversity of sexism back in the day, which was like pretty extreme compared to where it is now. And she would tell these stories. She'd come home like this person's dead to me, But at the same time, she just didn't stop, and to this day does not stop. And so it gave me this kind of thought that, like, we're not helpless as artists. We're in fact, we have more tools than any artist had 30 years ago at our fingertips. I remember Amanda Palmer and I were talking, and she said, I can send a message out on Twitter, and it can be instantly replicated by close to 1 million people if they choose to. That's an immense power. William Blake, struggling in his little house in London back in the day, literally invented modern printing because he couldn't get someone to print his stuff. And so when we think about becoming like kind of these islands of business as artists, the technology that is helpful in my mind is one that promotes that and gives the most power back to the creator. And so that way you should stand eye to eye with your platform. If you don't stand eye to eye with your platform, that's something you have to watch out for very carefully. And as someone who's built a platform, I took that responsibility very, very, very much to heart, because I hacked MySpace a long time ago, and I remember getting, like a call from a Universal A&R guy. It was like, hey, I saw you got 1 million plays on MySpace. That's amazing. I said, check it out tomorrow. There'll be not 1 million, because it was just a game, And then I watched what happens when MySpace suddenly said, I'm not going to allow you to communicate with your users anymore. I was like, but those are the ones that buy my tickets. Those are the ones that buy my albums. Like, how do I, without that? So yeah, that's.
Yeah, I think that's great, and I think what everyone here has seen over the course of these last couple of days, and even the self-care classes this morning with the meditation, yoga, and journaling. If you guys were lucky enough to be there for that, if not, they're on the Facebook group. Is that we were all coming back to the fact of, number one, you're more powerful than you think you are, and number two, don't stop, just keep going. And one of the other things too, which you mentioned with your mom, is that have that entrepreneurial spirit. If something is broken, fix it, make it your own. I mean, I was tired of being at the major labels and feeling burnt out all the time, and learning how to manage that and learn about mindset. I was like, well, now I'm going to start a company about it, because that's what I want to fix. So, just being able to see the bigger picture, that's why we're here talking about how to think like an entrepreneur rather than just, I want to book a gig or I want to sell, a CD. It's, it's bigger than that. So thank you for
That's okay. It's also, just on that front, I do 20 minutes of what I call quiet time every day. It's not formal meditation. I studied Zen meditation for quite a while too. And there's a couple of reasons for that. So there's a couple of analogies of entrepreneurship that I like. The first of which is you throw yourself off a cliff and start to build the plane while you're in the air. And I remember, I was so lucky to have entrepreneurs help me when I was building Pledge Music. Like I remember writing to Derek Sivers saying, I have this great idea for artists being able to fund their albums before they've made them. And he's like, sounds great, build it. That was his advice to me. 6 months later, I sent him an email with a link saying, there, built it. And he's like, do you know how many emails I send out and no one ever does? And I had no idea. The first spreadsheet I ever saw was my own. I Googled P&L while I was looking at a P&L. I didn't know what any of this stuff meant, but it didn't matter. I was already flying. There was no, it was like, and this very good friend of mine, Jesus, he said to me once, how do you deal with the ups and downs of entrepreneurial life? And I said, what do you mean how you deal with them? That's all it is.
Yeah.
So what the calmness of mind does is it makes you okay to be, to suffer the slings and arrows of it, because if you can't carve out the fact that it's not personal, it's just, this is a fact right now. Today, someone wants to give you $100,000 to do something. Tomorrow, they want to sue you for $100,000. Those are two different things. But in reality, you're going to walk down the street the same. You're going to get a cup of coffee. You'll meet your friends. You'll hug your loved ones. You'll do all those things. And when he got that, and I said to him, like it's not for everybody. It really isn't. But there's another expression of it, which is no one lies on their deathbed wishing they'd spent more time at the office unless they do something that they love at the office. And, I think that it's important to say, you got to take care of your mental health. And if all you do is think about what it is that you're doing, you'll drive yourself insane. If you can sit for 20 minutes in quiet, calm contemplation, which is an art in and of itself, right? Just to do it is difficult. But if you get there to where you're doing it, I believe that you're allowing your brain to rethink all of the possibilities, and thoughts will come and they'll go. And the nice part is the thoughts aren't personal either. You know, the great test is this. We're way off base here.
No, this is
the great test is this.
Right in sync with everything.
Say to yourself, I wonder what my next thought will be. And there's a silence, and then a voice appears, and then you've got to ask yourself, who said that? What is it that's able to see a voice occur in that moment? So I think that what happens is, I find that I'll walk into I'll wake up, I've had 17,000 dreams and thoughts downloaded, I'm about to pick up my phone, check the email, about to check, on and on. All of a sudden you sit for 20 minutes, let the madness there, listen to the madness, say, my God, this person's an idiot, whatever they're saying is pointless. And then finally, you go, oh, there's a silence beneath it all. And what that has always enabled me to do, always, touch wood, has been able to find another way around the problem. And so every brick wall you hit, there's no, you force through to a certain extent, you keep pushing, but when you take that calm moment, you find the way over, under, or around. It's rarely through it, I've found, but, and then there are other times that just call for nothing but action. But the key is that when you create something out of nothing, ask yourself where that's coming from. If you don't honor that quite often, then I think you get yourself to where it becomes mechanistic. It becomes something that you just do because I wake up every day, I'm a musician, that's what I do, I write. And I think that the calm space in between it is essential, whether it's business, music, or whatever it is. Sit there and say, I fear writing the spreadsheet. I fear it. It's a horrible thing. What is it that's fearing it right now? Kind of stupid because I require this thing to get to the next bit. So then you just and I think the brain's adaptive. So what it does is it basically just like water finds its path and goes, oh, there we go, right? We did that. That's done. Now I can go and have a few drinks.
Yeah, exactly. No, and that's everything we've been talking about this weekend is that, slow down and ask yourself, why are you doing this? And if something is giving you resistance, like you said, well, why? And why is such, this is the theme that's come through every panel, every workshop this weekend has go back to your why, go back to why something is happening, go back to why you're fearing it. Why do you fear a spreadsheet? And I love spreadsheets, but I still if I have to create something, I'm like, oh, I don't want to do this because why? It's a bunch of boxes, but maybe it's my fear of knowing what those boxes are going to tell me once I hit, do the formula in it. Yeah. So there's always something there that you can get to, and if you just reflect.
The first business lesson I ever had was this amazing lady named Karen Crofton. She was the accountant that would look after the day-to-day stuff at Pledge Music early on. And I'd never done any of this before. And we had this big meeting, 6 of us around the table, we're talking about, projections. We finished the meeting, and I said, Karen, can you hang on for a minute? And she's like, sure. So she sits down, I said, Karen, I don't understand a word of what was just said. She's like, what do you mean? I'm like, I don't know what any of this means. And she said, okay. And I said, so can we stay in this room until I do? And she's like, sure. And she walked it through. And what was amazing was I could explain to her how to program something or how to play something with the effortlessness with which it comes to me. She explains that with the effortlessness with which it comes to her. Both of us looked at each other like what we do is extraordinary. And I'm looking at her, some cash poor, cash flow, something's not moving. I don't know what it is, but And then the other thing I'd say this is that people are desperate to share what they know and what they're good at. Use that. I've the number of times I've sat with extraordinary entrepreneurs who will give their time if you ask them it and say, and they'll walk you through a problem that seems like to them it's effortless. Isn't Elon Musk? He's like, yeah, so we'll just basically put up, the world will turn, then we'll come bring it down again. There, 25 minutes, London to Tokyo. How hard was that? And you're like, pretty hard. Like, there's no weather in space, no turbulence. Okay, that's amazing. But the way he thinks, to him that's just normal, whereas we wouldn't think, why not put rocket up and then bring it back down again? Everyone else thinks, let's go up, let's go really slowly across it. And so the innovation comes when you kind of separate that space. The idea for Pledge Music came when I was literally lying on an air mattress in my mom's spare room, stressing about how to make my next album. I'm like, well, people ask me to hear my demos. Why don't I allow them to buy the album and then I'll make it? And then everyone looked at me like, that's insane, it doesn't work that way. And anytime someone tells you it doesn't work that way, that's where you start to push.
You say why?
And and my stepfather, again, really successful, very wealthy manager. And he's like, Benj, look, just go get a record deal, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, yeah, it sounds simple for you because you could call someone up and you get a record deal. And when I told him this idea, he's like, I don't know, man. And I remember, but the moment of it, it just felt so logical to me. But it came as one of 100 ideas that I would normally just roll over and go back to sleep on. Instead, I sat up, wrote it down, and the next thing you know, I'm building the basic website, and then all the organizational things that needed to come, money, friends, co-founders, the digital guy, the coder, all kind of, it all came to be. And so these things are entirely possible. I wound up $98,000 in debt after making an album and going on tour, and I just had to find a way out of that. Well, how do you do that? And the answer is you just you start digging, right. And you figure it out. And you gotta have faith. You gotta have faith in the fact that will occur. This most recent project I'm building, the blockchain project. I was chatting with a technologist, ex-Apple guy, super smart. And he said, man, you really stuck your neck out publicly on this one. And until he said that, it hadn't occurred to me that I had. All of a sudden, I get vertigo. I'm like, oh, wow. I'm like, this has to work, right? This really has to work. At that point, I didn't have anyone who was going to engineer it. I didn't have any money to, it was literally, it was an idea that I wrote down.
You jumped.
And then I got 1,000 emails within about a week saying, hey, we'd help you with this. Hey, how do we, on and on. And then a call I'd put off 6 times is like, hey, can we talk to you? And then that's how I met the CTO. That's how I met I knew this one lawyer guy. I'm like, hey, I have an idea. Should I patent it? And he's like, I'll patent it for you. Okay, so, how much will it cost me? He says, $1,000. I said, do you want cash or Bitcoin? He says, Bitcoin. It's worth $16,000 today. So you made money, So it's one of those things where don't let how I'm not saying that you are, but don't let how it may look or feel deter you at all. I took an idea that I had in my mom's air mattress. So I was living at my mom's house in an air mattress with my wife. My wife was supporting us while I was being a musician. Mm-hmm. And I was playing shows in strange places. I would basically take any gig I was offered. Should I tell you the story how that started?
No.
So I'm literally, this is the timeline. I'm lying on an air mattress in my mom's spare room. I'm broke as all hell. $50 maybe to my name. My wife's bringing in all the money and I try not to spend it all on, partying and playing shows. So I have the idea for Pledge Music, start to write it down. My mom's boyfriend comes downstairs and says, what you working on? And I said, it's called Pledge Music. Go look. Bought the domain name for £7.95. I was in London at the time for Pledge Music. It was available. What are the odds for that, right? And then I had a show in Amsterdam from London, and they were going to pay me €50, which was about $45, and they were going to feed me. I didn't need to go to the show. It wasn't a good idea, but something was like, you need to go play the show. So I bus to Amsterdam. It takes 16 hours. It's a miserable journey. There's fights in the back and you name it. I get there, and I'm trying to be very calm about all this for my €50, and I'm like, so anyway, after the show, this Australian guy comes up to me. He's like, hey, I was at your last show here. And I'm like, oh yeah, good to see you, man, this. And we start drinking this thing that they call a kopstot, which means a headbutt. And it's a beer, and you drop a shot of Geneva and you down it. Lethal. And so we started talking, and he says, what are you up to? And I said, well, this music thing clearly isn't working out for me the way I intended. I live at my mom's house on an air mattress. I'm 34 years old. But I've had this idea for this company. And I tell him the idea. And he says, don't tell anyone else this idea. I'm an intellectual property rights lawyer specializing in the internet. I want to co-found this company with you. And drinks are on me. So, he exited the company 4 years later, a millionaire. from that, we're still friends to this day. He still helps me on all of the deals that I do. And that was from that one, like, imagine if I hadn't gone. He was the one piece of validation that really went in. And then, you know, I called up, so the internet, this is 8 years ago now, but so I didn't know who was going to build this thing. So I emailed the guy that built my first website in 1999. And it was just called benrogers.com, because I didn't like Benji back then. And it was a Guinness glass that was open, that was filling. It paused. It said, "Good things come to those who wait." It was loading Flash in the background. To the top, this guy Zach built it. So I emailed Zach and I was like, "Zach, I need a website built that does this crowdfunding thing for musicians. Will you build it for me?" He says, "I'm a developer. I don't build websites. I code in Ruby on Rails." Gives me all this great, you know, kind of language. And I said, "If I have pictures and a payment thing needs to go on the internet, you can do that, right?" He goes, yeah, I can do that. He says, "So you build websites effectively?" "Yeah." "Okay." He's like, "It's not like that." I'm like, "I don't care." So I said to him, "Will you build this for me?" And he says, "No, because you haven't raised any money." And I said, "Well, how much money do you need me to raise?" He's like, "I don't know, like $500,000. I'm like, "Okay." So I call up a couple other friends. "Hey, drummer from my old band, you went to business school. Do you think this will work?" He's like, "I love that idea. Great idea. I'll help you with the business plan." So now I've got this lawyer in Amsterdam, this developer in New York who wants me to raise $500,000. My best friend lives in Boston, who's working on the business plan for me. And then I go to my other friend who, he's a CTO, quote unquote, which meant that when you first bought an Apple Macintosh, the apocalypse. When you first bought it, you couldn't make Microsoft stuff work on it. So he would come over, charge a fortune to help you do that. That was his technical knowledge, right? But we were best friends. So all of us got together and we built this thing, and we sent out 3 business plans to people saying, "Hey, do you think you'd fund this?" And I look back at the emails and I'm just like, how did this ever work? But one guy, a guy I went to high school with, said, "I'll give you $500,000 for this. Let's do it." And it was just okay, whoa. And I felt the world kind of move like that. And so the next thing you know, I call up Zach and I'm like, "Well, I got $500,000, so you said you would." And he'd already been started building it because he was just so excited for the idea. So we flew to New York and we basically coded this thing, and 3 months later we went live. And I remember the night that the site went live, I launched it too early by accident. And then I remember sitting with Zach saying, "What happens when it hits 100%? And we're on Skype because none of us had ever been in the same room. And he goes, "I don't know. I should take care of it." So it was this thing. Now, if I'd thought all of that through before I started, never would have started. I'd be bartending and playing in my band, which may have been better, who knows. But at the same time, I think all great things require that kind of jump, that leap of faith to know that something will catch you. And we never looked back. I mean, we really didn't. And what was funny was when we had some hard times. We were in a basement. Our first office was in the basement beside a rehearsal room. So when the band was rehearsing, there was nothing. I mean, you couldn't hear a thing. It was like being in the room with them. And so we would go to the coffee shop for those times, but we were all remote. We were, so it was never like nothing ever would. Right. And then the other thing was it wouldn't die. Like people wanted it to work, and things that I now look back on and say, "Well, that's quite clever," were completely made up on the spot. Like there was no,
It's a wing and a prayer.
Yeah. And so when that guy said, "Well, you've stuck your neck out," I realized that that's all you're supposed to do. In the same way that when you write a new song, you have no idea if it's any good. I used to go play open mics because I figured at least I'll get some harsh critics and the songwriters. And you know when it's not working. When you're playing, you know that this sucks, and you can't get out of it. You're stuck in it for another 3 minutes. You're like, "I've got a chorus here." Make it sound less bad. But at least you should try. So,
yeah. No, I think it's wonderful because again, it's everything that we've talked about. I mean, I think if you want to be an entrepreneur, and like I say, all musicians out here are entrepreneurs, that you need persistence, but you also need to be open to experimentation, and you also have to be really inquisitive. because you asked, like, you knew you had the idea, but, you know, you're not a venture capitalist, you're not, you know, a lawyer who could patent something, you're not any of those things. So you ask, you figure, well, how can I get there? And that's what Cheryl talked about yesterday, that, you know, here you thought you'd need a couple different people to fund it, and one person was ready to fund it. So you don't know where the money's gonna come from, and you don't know the how yet, but just ask, and saves the trouble of dealing with 50 different people. You had one person to give you the money to start it. So yeah, I mean, that it really just takes trust in yourself and just being able to ask questions and figure out the rest later. And I think that's a really great story to attest to, because we're all here and everybody's followed you and knows, you know, Pledge Music, and guys, it's no different than anything else that anybody else here has talked about. So I think that's really great. And one of my questions to you would be, so, you know, you were an artist who had a problem and you wanted to solve it. What do you think, what's kind of your why that you decided to make this for not just you? You know, you could have just said, oh, I'm going to fund my next album, but you decided to build something and put your neck out to do that, and you're also doing it with blockchain music. So where do you think that comes from?
I had a moment of reckoning. So my stepfather manages Phil Collins and Genesis and one of Pink Floyd. They're three managers, and so I watched Phil Collins play thousands of times. One of the greatest drummers I've ever seen in my life. And the guy works so hard, like it's incredible. I remember watching one night kind of backstage, and I would sit there and watch him do In the Air Tonight every night. No matter what happened, I went In the Air Tonight. And because you've never seen an entire stadium become a drummer, other than when that kicks in, right?
Yeah, the Mike Tyson.
And Phil's ethic, his work ethic, is unlike anything I've ever seen. Like none of what he does is an accident. And what's funny is when my stepfather started to manage that band, he was the drummer. So it was like, what were the odds that it would spawn both Peter Gabriel and him, and then the other solo stuff that went on? And I realized at a certain point when I was playing music that I wasn't going to be that. That wasn't in me. Not that I couldn't play or perform or do it like this, but the love that I was feeling for it was suddenly challenged by something else that came in. And with Phil, there was nothing that would knock him off that path. He is like force meets an immovable object, right? That's what he is. Whereas with me, when I saw what Pledge Music could become, and I saw a way of doing it, it became a challenge. And then what happened was, where I would try and organize a drummer, a bass player, a guitarist, some keyboards around an analog recording device or a digital recording device, that was the organization of units. Coding and putting something on the internet that a human is going to have to interface with on a mobile phone or an Apple TV or a Samsung, it was a different canvas to paint on. And what I found was I loved to create things, and that it wasn't necessarily music that was the only thing I wanted to create. That was a very unique thing for me. So when I watch a crappy band on stage, in my head, I'm just like, give me the good stop. Just give me that, I'll take care of it. You just don't do that. And it's a very judgmental, like old school musician thing to me. But the other part of me says is, if you had the balls, go up and do it yourself. You're the Benji, like get off. So it became the idea to paint with another canvas. And the second reason that it was an easy transition for me was because I saw directly that huge companies like Amazon, Apple in particular, were going to make it very, very difficult for certain segments of the music community, and that the major labels were going to have a huge amount of power over what happened if we didn't democratize what a musician could do. And the analogy is this: if I wanted to create, 30 years ago, if I wanted to bootleg someone's album on vinyl, that was difficult. Same thing with cassettes. I wanted to create a great version of it. Digital erased that. My dad had a battle with his record label for his band one day, so he took the safety master, which was the exact same as the regular master, and released that. He's like, well, you don't do it? Fine, here you go. I'm gonna release it anyway, because it was the same. When I saw that, the fact that you could replicate exactly a digital copy of something, that's when I realized if we don't fix how music is funded in a traditional way, we're going to hand over all the power to someone with the check. And venture capital is the same. When I go to raise money from venture capital, I have to go in and I'm going to give away X% of my company, and then they're going to sit on the board and they're going to fire me as the CEO, even though it's my company, you know. So it gets that way. So what I wanted, what I was able to see with Pledge was, an artist could come along, and if they've hustled and done the work like I had, I could walk into the studio in profit and make an album. And all I had to do was use the tools that existed in the marketplace. And as long as I knew who the humans were that liked my music, I could sell them something. And it didn't, and this was the other strange thing, it didn't have to exist. And I was saying to you before, music that exists sometimes makes less money than music before it exists, which is a really strange concept, unless you've done it. And so effectively, when Pledge launched, I suddenly saw, why isn't all music funded this way? What conceivable reason could there be to take a loan from a record label? And it wasn't until I got to know all the record label people and all the digital people and on and on that I suddenly started to see kind of how the sausage was made. And there's this really amazing kind of thought. So when a manager says to me today, I've been offered a deal for my artist with, name the label, doesn't matter. I say to them, okay, why are you going to take it? Well, because they're going to put skin in the game, they're going to put money down. And I told them a story. I said, we worked with a band that started off selling 1.2 million albums with a label. And the second album came out and did 300,000 albums, same label. But the touring business was growing. Third album, 110,000 albums. Touring business is massive. So the label says, we'll re-up your deal because we love you, but give us 30% of your live. And the manager, I'm sitting with the manager, and I said to the manager, I said, so let me get this straight. You went from playing 300-seat venues to like 35,000. And you're going to give up a piece of that revenue so that you can get a loan at shitty terms from a company that has failed you 3 albums in a row on the one thing they're put on this earth to do, which is to sell albums. And this makes sense to you. Oh, Benji, doesn't work that way, you see. And I'm like, okay, tell me how it doesn't work, please. I'd love to know. Because I'm saying to him, if you could sell 10,000 people a night, the album before it comes out at $55 each, that's more money than the label's going to give you in 3 shows, right? Done. And you have direct contact with every single one of those humans because those men and women have given you their information. They're saying, please have it. And so what's wild is, now when that manager says to me, should I sign a deal? I say to them, go into the A&R person and ask them this one question. Say to them, of the last 99 bands you signed, of the last 100 bands you signed, how many of them have recouped? How many of them are profitable? And the A&R person won't know, whoever they are. So then you say to them, well, great, to move ahead, just come back to me with that information. Of the last 100 albums you put out, or releases you did, how many of them have made money and that are profitable? And the answer will be 1, right? And then I say to the artist or manager, your music is your digital gold, right? That's your digital gold. So if you walked into a bank with your gold and you said, hey, I want to put this 100,000 pieces of gold in your bank. Of the last 100 people that did this, how many of them lost all of the gold? And if the bank manager said, well, 99% of the time we lose you money, but the 1%, you're going to be fine. You go to another bank, right? And so I think that like we grew up, most of it, I speak for myself, I grew up in a world whereby you had to be told your worth by other measures. Now it's this: if there were 25 humans in front of you when you play a gig, 10 of those will want to be on your email list, and probably the ones that want to be on your email list are more than likely to give you money in exchange for you making music for them, whether it be in that moment or later on. The second thing is this: we're broadcasting live on Facebook right now. Why isn't every single show sold to people all over the world? If I'm in Reykjavik and I want to see someone play in LA, why do I have to be in the room? What conceivable reason for that? But there's this beautiful thing called the internet. If I can build a company spanning multiple countries, why can't a show be broadcast? So we've got to get out of this idea that music has to happen in this one-way specific box. And here's what I'll say is that if fans aren't funding you, right? If they're not, why? And then the second question is do they have the means with which to fund you? And so I want you to just, this was, Lou and I were talking about this in the car yesterday, but like, an artist will say, listen to my music on Spotify. And so, this happened to me yesterday, so my friend Sydney Wazer released an album, my friend Elizabeth from Catapult's releasing an album, they're all pledge artists, right? And so, when I get to the Spotify landing page, what's the maximum amount of money I can spend from that page on that artist? 0. I can share that I've listened to the song, but I'm effectively paying Spotify $10 to get it down the line so they get their 0.000. And so the music industry en masse has decided to send their fans to the place they can spend the least. Sort of a strange thought. And this was what's wild was on Pledge Music. I remember when we first launched, we would offer, an artist would offer something for $75. And then all of a sudden we would see a $100 charge come in. And at first I remember late night going, wait, do we have a billing problem? Like something's not right. Fans were giving more than something cost. For one very simple reason, they could. And so if you think about the way in which you consume music today, what's the most I can do on Apple Music if I like it? What's the most I can do on Spotify, Tidal, Google Play, you name it? Is I can sit there and stare at the thing, I can screenshot it, but in theory, these are like means of consumption. And look, 87% of humans want that. Great, give it to them. I'm not saying don't. But for the 17%, like 83%, yeah, 17%, that really do, math not so good, that really do want to do more, if you don't let them spend in the way of their choosing, that's on you. So if if you say, because it comes down to what's the value of something, right? And I wrote a blog about this the other day where it was like, 1Q84 is the massive Haruki Murakami book. It's this big, it's huge. So the publisher has decided that it's $12.99, which means that 50% of that price goes to the store, and then 50% goes to the publisher, and then they give it to the author. Now, when I first pick up the book, it's a big book, so I'll say, okay, it's $12.99. 50 pages in, this is a $100 book to me. But I'm stuck, because I've paid $12.99 and it's gone. And at the end of the book, this is one of my favorite books ever, it's like, what can I do? I'm stuck, there's nothing else. I can go find another Murakami book, but like, how do we express affinity as fans? And in gaming culture, you have virtual currencies and coins, or like tipping, So my company, Pledge Music, acquired a company called Noise Trade. One of the reasons is because people would give away their music for free, and the average tip by this subset of superfans was $6.50. That's about what you'd make if you sold it on iTunes. The difference is you're giving it away for free, but in exchange for data. So I had this thought, imagine in a digital book where the book is free. Have it in exchange for data about you. And then after you've read the first 30 pages, pop back and say, hey, do you want to pay for it? What do you want to pay? Worst case scenario, they want to pay $1.99. But they're not your customer, they don't love it. But what you want to do is get $15.99, $13.99, on and on all the way up. And it's a really strange thing unless you've done it. But fans want to spend money on art, and they want to support people, but we as artists traditionally don't give them a way to do so. And that's insane to me. I've had conversations with the heads of labels and publishers and PROs and you name it. And I've said to them, all I want to do is do more, and all you allow me to do is less. Why? And look, they own equity in Spotify, and that's just the whole of the business. And I'm not anti-Spotify, or I wish they would be less evil, but that's another matter. But at the same time, why can't I express my likes as a consumer with money? Why does it always have to be another metric? And what Pledge taught me, and what Blockchain is teaching me, is never assume you know what someone wants to pay until you've offered them the ability to do more. Mm-hmm. Never assume that. Never sit there and say they would never want to pay $100 for this. They will, and I have a rule in life: if someone wants to give me money, I will find a way. I'm not going to make it difficult for them. I accept Bitcoin, Ethereum, Litecoin, whatever you want. Just and it's there was this other big perception thing, and this is less so now because of Kickstarter, Indiegogo, and Pledge, but there was this thought in the music industry, oh my God, begging for money. You're begging, you're saying, please give me money at this. And what's funny is when you talk to the average fan, they're like, oh my God, how do I give you more? I love this, this is amazing. I get to see why you're doing it. I get to look in, and on and on. And again, it's a bunch of managers and a bunch of people that don't touch the superfan community, not understanding what these men and women want to do. They don't understand it. They're not asking the question. They're not saying, how do you want to pay? They're saying, you should pay $10 to a streaming service. That's what you want. I know, I've done market research. Yeah? Then why has it taken $2.6 billion to get Spotify to 60 million users? Think of this way, this is the strangest thing. When I was in college, I spent probably 40% of all the money I owned on music. I loved it. I would buy a CD. And when I couldn't afford any more CDs, I would sell the CDs to buy more. All I wanted to do was buy music. And I loved it. And if you'd said to me then, for $10 a month, you can have access to 45 million CD quality digital tracks on any device, on a device you can carry around with you, right? In CD quality, you can listen to them offline or online. Can you imagine how extraordinary that would have been? Well, that's what we have. Why is it so hard to sell to people? Why is it $2 billion to get these companies to scale? Why, Apple, the largest company in the world, effectively, just hit 30 million users, paid subscribers to the digital gold of the last 100 years of our musical greatness for $10 a month. It's nothing. And yet, why is it hard to sell? And it's because the humans don't understand it. The technologists said, well, this is what they want. Well, we didn't ask them. And I remember doing a survey with some of my students when I teach at Berkeley, and I said, we pushed a survey out, and we said to the question, how much would you pay to stream CD quality music over your phone? They said $2, $3. I said to them, how much would you pay to be able to digitally download onto your device up to any of 45 million songs in CD quality? Oh, $20. See, two different things. Now, the streaming service does the same thing. It allows you to cache the music. The difference is that they still feel there's an ownership component. So renting music seems crazy, but being able to cache and own it for $120 a year actually adds up. And the second thing was this: we realized that a lot of people thought that streaming was going to take away from their data. So they thought they were actually paying $30 a month for something that would disappear. So again, this is a massive industry that completely got a huge piece of this wrong. And then the second side of it too, of course, is that the artist is really the interface. So effectively, Beyonce should have sold Tidal 40 million subscriptions because she's amazing, smartest businesswoman we have in the music industry, arguably. And she shone her light on Tidal. Now that should have, if you think about it, if you put 100 million, 200 million eyeballs on something, that should be the biggest streaming service in the world. Why wasn't it? They don't want Tidal, they want Beyonce. They don't want Spotify, they want the artist. So the power that you have is in where you choose to shine that light. Never ever forget that. Spotify, if you're a developer or you're an app, Spotify will pay you a bounty of about $40 for every user you bring to them that turns into a subscriber. Now, if you as an artist bring a subscriber to Spotify that pays, do you get paid that $40? No, you get 0.00001 for that. So what's the economics there? How does that work? Is that the best first place to send people? And the second thing is and this is one of the reasons I'm building Blockchain, is I believe that artists should have the ability to set their own prices. You didn't negotiate the deals with Warner, Sony, Universal, and Merlin, so why should you be subject to the same rates? Digitally, there's no way to do that today. We can build it, but effectively, what I would say is this: as an artist, former artist, and as artists yourselves, think to yourself, I'm about to send my 100 fans to your platform, your site. What do you give me back? What do I get in exchange for that? What's the deal between us? So with Spotify, you send 100 people their way, and let's say 20 of them sign up. That's $120 a year for Spotify, their cut's 30%, so that's how much you've made them, right? So they'll pay $40, right? So you've made Spotify $40, and they're returning to you 0.000. Now you're in their ecosystem, and maybe that will get you money over time, sure, but either way. Now what if you said, stream my album on this platform in exchange for an email address, and then send it to Spotify to listen to the rest of it? Then you get the best of both worlds, because you get the email address, you get the data, which if it's worth $41 to Spotify, imagine what it's worth to you. $55 in a pledge or crowdfunding campaign, right? $25 in tickets. Then it's the next album, and the ability to do that. So that data is everything for an artist. It's everything. Email address, phone number. You know, this is your digital gold. And if the music leads to you being able to get digital information on the consumers that want to, and the fans that want to buy it, that is everything to you. So when you think about where you're going to shine your light as a creator, ask yourself, what does it give back? What do I get in return for that? Return on attention. If I'm going to give my attention this way, what comes back to me?
And I think two of the biggest takeaways there is, one, I mean, you were saying, you know, people buy more for an album that's not yet out because they're investing in you. And we talked about this in so many panels this weekend, is that it's you. And it's not just, yes, you might make amazing music and that might touch them and you know, give them a certain amount of value, but they're buying into you. And that's why before you even make an album, they're willing to give you money because they want to see you succeed. Because everybody has this dream, and we talked about this, of like wanting to be this rock star. And you guys are doing it. And so let them feel that they're living vicariously through you by supporting you, by helping you get there. Because if you get there, they get there. And that's what the value is for them. That's why they don't need to see the album first. They just want to know that it's going to happen. And that's that whole trust factor that we talked about, is that if you say you're going to put an album out, and maybe you will, maybe you won't, but if they're going to invest in you and now you're accountable to those people, they can trust that you're going to do it and hopefully do it really well. And I think the other takeaway from everything that you were saying is that, you know, you have, you know, people, I think artists always look at trying to get signed by the label, right? So then they say, well, how do I get signed? And then the people in the industry tell them, well, you need like 500,000 followers before a major label will look at you. And then they say, okay, well then how do I get 500,000 followers? Like that's the chain of thought. Where instead it's like, and we've also said this many times, and I'm glad you brought it up, is that you don't have to worry about the 500,000 people. Worry about those core fans that are gonna pay over and over and over again, rather than trying to get free downloads out to 500,000 people who, you know, majority of them will probably just delete it. You know, so focusing on those fans, don't worry about the number of fans. Worry about just getting those fans really energized to spend money repeatedly over time.
Yeah, it's I'm an investor and an advisor to Ryan Leslie's company, and Ryan's an extraordinary entrepreneur, and I've never seen anyone work as hard as he does. And his company is basically a very simple principle that his type of community texts more than they do email. And so he built an app called Superphone, and we were on a panel together at MIT, and he was like, "You got to see my, I love what you're doing at Pledge. You got to see this phone thing I built." I'm looking at it, and and I'm like, "Are these numbers real?" He's like, "Yeah, this is how I make my living." I'm like, "What are you talking about?" He says, "I text my fans, and they text me back." I'm like, "Well, how do you handle it?" Well, he's got 16,000 fans in there, like messaging him. He's like, "I built an AI that does this," and I'm looking at him and I go, "Why?" And he says, he tells this amazing story where he says, my first album I put out independently by myself, sold it, and I made a ton of money out of doing this because it resonated with a lot of people. And he was always very good at knowing who his fans were. He was shaking their hands, etc. And then he got signed to a label. He went to the label, and he says to the label sells more albums, so it's great success. 3 times, 4 times more albums, and he made a quarter of the money. So he says to the label, he's like, "I'm not really sure what happened there, but here's a new song. Send it to all of the people that bought this album with a link to buy the new one now." And the label went, "We can't do that." I was like, "What do you mean?" "Well, we're the label, so what we do is we take your music so A&R takes it to distribution takes it to the store takes it to the human. So we don't know who the human is. So he's like, so you have to ratchet up the entire thing again every time you put an album out? Yeah. So you don't know who your customers are. One of our customers are the stores. We sell to the stores. Oh. So then Ryan's like, well, I don't want to do that. So he built an app where basically if you go to his Twitter, it's just his phone number. You text it, and a machine pings back, hey, it's Ryan. Thanks a lot. Give me your email address. So now he's got 2 points of contact, Facebook, Twitter, on. He's built this thing that effectively discounts and communicates with fans in a very cool way. And he makes 2, 3, sometimes 5 calls a day to his fans on their birthdays. He text messages them all the time. And he makes $2 million per album cycle from 15,000 fans. And this is an entrepreneur unlike any I've ever seen. And he's disarming because he's smart but he's not doing anything that is not doable. And so like my idea, I built Pledge so that artists could do this. He built Super Funds where artists could do that. So what happens is when you're solving a problem that you effectively have, you're solving a problem for everybody. It's a universal thing. And so what's funny now is that he makes more money than he ever made with a label. And there's this other preconception about a label, which is this. Your job, and I will say this to you bluntly, your job is to sell to your fans. A label's job is to sell to everybody else. A label will, can I swear?
Yeah.
A label will fuck up selling to your fans faster than anything imaginable. Because you know how a label sells to your fans today? Listen to my music on Spotify. How is that ever going to be better than what you could do yourself? One, if you put up a web page on Squarespace or whatever you use that basically said, here are my downloads, that's better than saying that, right? Like literally anything is better than sending them there. And so what you got to think about is like so if you look at Ryan Leslie's music, he has one song on Spotify. His label's full albums on there. He's got one song on there. The rest of it you get directly from him. He doesn't want everybody. He wants the right people. So the men and women that does, he told a story where he's like, he wanted to make a video and he wanted to have some Lamborghinis in it. So he hit up his fans. He's like, hey, anyone got a Lamborghini? And this guy wrote back to him and said, if you can be in, it was like Denmark or somewhere to shoot the video, I am the manager of the Lamborghini dealership. So we literally have, so his video has got like 30 Lamborghinis in it, right? Driving like this. So, and he's like, now, had I gone to my label and said I want to make a video with 30 Lamborghinis, it would have been like, well, that's cost benefit. That's all right. But no, this guy's like, so not only that, the guy put him up in the house, you know, the whole thing. So like, never underestimate, because what you said was really prescient here and very important. Most humans do not do what they love. It's a really sad thing. And when I think of what hell would look like for me, it's sitting under fluorescent lights, using Microsoft products to count other people's money. That's my dear of hell. That is literally like, I don't understand it, and I'm working on software that makes me reinstall updates every 2 seconds. But, there was a lady I met through Pledge. I was tweeting, I was at a Pledge show, and she's like, hey, you're the Pledge music guy, yeah. And she says to me, I've pledged on like 35 different things, and she's scrolling down her phone showing me all the things. I'm like, oh, it's amazing, you're so cool. And I said, why? And she said, well, I'm kind of a musician, but I took a job as an accountant. But now I get to go in the studio and watch all these artists make stuff. So every day, because she's pledged on so many things, an artist from the studio sends her, here's a demo, here's this. And she, as you said, is living vicariously through it. So she's spending $35, $55, $75 per experience, getting $1,000 worth of it back. And what's amazing is she's now friends with some of those artists. She's learning guitars and stuff because she doesn't have that drive to go do it. She went to that jump, so she admires it. And her way of expressing that love is through money and participation and sharing. And that's powerful, and we shouldn't ever forget that.
Well, and I think it's important to not forget that you're not just changing people's lives with your music. You know, you're changing people's lives just by doing. Yeah. Just by showing them that you're willing to do what they may be not willing to do or can't do or feel they can't do or whatever it is. So that's why when you have those moments that you don't want to get out of bed or do something, that knowing who you're doing it for and why you're doing it, that's what enables the people who make it, whatever that looks to you. That's what that difference is, that they kept going because they kept remembering this matters.
Yeah.
And it matters to people. So we do have to start to wrap up, but I don't want you to leave without telling us more about .blockchain and what that means. We learned a little bit yesterday about licensing and pitching your music out to people and placements, but if you could let us know about what it is and what it would mean for a musician.
Yeah. So 5 minutes to talk about it. Yeah.
No,
It's all good. It's all good. When I was at Pledge full time, we would start to get files sent to us, from the artist. So the artist would deliver the file into our service, and we would send it out to the fans. And I noticed that the file was normally WAV files, .wavs, and that the information was there wasn't much to it. There wasn't much. And I said to one of my CTO at the time, I said, "What is this thing that's being sent to us?" And he's like, "I don't know." And it was like, that kind of worrying. We're getting thousands and thousands of these things. We don't know what they are. Like, it could be a virus, it could be porn. We have no clue. So what was interesting was, as this started to evolve, I looked at it and I said, "Well, what is a WAV file?" And I was talking to the gentleman over there early on, and if you were to write in correct metadata to your song, the artist name, album name, track name, put some genre stuff into it, and you were to encode it in this WAV file, I could hit Apple I in my iTunes library and rewrite all that metadata. Kind of a strange thought, right? That something that you've owned, I can now call Benji's Great Album and release it as Benji's Great Album, and you would never know. The service wouldn't know because there's no underlying strength to it. And the WAV file was introduced 26 years ago during the presidency of George Bush I. So what technology do you use from 26 years ago? We're streaming live on technology that didn't exist back then, right, effectively, to a massive social network that did not exist. And we're still using the WAV file from back then. MP3 was introduced 2 years later. So what I wanted to figure out is why are we using this archaic technology to convey our digital gold? And the gentleman here is a publisher. I said to him, "Prove to me that you are a publisher of something." Well, I got a piece of paper. So we have a piece of paper that says one thing, a WAV file that can say anything, and 200 digital service providers, which will all have a different view of what's true. So the music industry operates on basically between 180 and 5,000 interoperable databases that do not speak the same language. So when you get your licensing information correct, where do you put it? Like, literally, where do you put it? So what I conceived of with .blockchain was, we're going to create a type of media file. So effectively, when you're in the studio, you would export it as this thing called a yoursongname.bc, and it will write the current state of truth of that song into a blockchain. Blockchain effectively means that everyone's got the same database. No one can delete anything. They can only ever amend forward. So it's like a change log. Everything that changes is stored by everyone that runs it. And the reasons for that are several. I won't go into unless you've got questions on it specifically. But what it effectively means is this. As a songwriter or an artist, you can digitally sign that track. And if I go to alter it in any way, it will say, "Do you wish to propose a change to this song?" So if you're the publisher, and I propose to say, "Actually, I'm the publisher," you will get a message that says, "Hey, Benji's just tried to overwrite all your information. Would you like to approve it, deny it?" And if you ignore it, it's the same thing as approving it. Because remember, blockchain just holds the current status of what's written there. So effectively, it's a way for an artist and songwriters to digitally sign their works. You could also write, for example, this song not to be used in any Donald Trump video. And so therefore, whilst that's not legally binding, there is a place to look at and say, "Oh, we can't use this one." Whereas today, it's used, and then afterwards, the problem. But then we've already whipped up the hatred, so who cares? And so, I don't want to get political, but so I think that the goal of this is that 8 years ago, a man, woman, or group of people named Satoshi Nakamoto gave away the blueprint for a system unlike anything that had ever existed. And what I believe is that we're looking at the second layer, if you will, of the internet. Blockchains are complex, they're strange, there's all kinds of flavors of them at the moment, but what you need to know is that a whole bunch of really smart developers and really smart programmers and really good people are trying to solve a way for musicians to digitally encode the rights into the songs. Which means if you were to try and rip the song out and push it back in somewhere else, it won't work. Your ownership is the key to making the song work. And so if you imagine today, you write a song and you co-write it with a friend of yours. How do you license that? So someone's going to find you. It's hard to do. If you use a sample, how do they make sure that that's cleared? And if you don't want to do the right thing, it's easy. Just use it. Who cares? If you want to do the right thing, it's more difficult. So we've enabled a way to make every song, if you will, a smart bundle. And so you can message the song, and the song will message the participants and back. So every song effectively has like a WhatsApp group on top of it, like a version of that. So if the publisher needs to give permission, the publisher can give permission digitally. If the performer needs to give permission, the performer can. The manager can be assigned this, the publisher, and then all the licenses can be done digitally, machine to machine. So what that would mean is, if you wanted to, when this is done, you'd be able to say, here is my song. These are all the million ways you can use it. But if your video contains cat torture, white supremacist rhetoric, or whatever you want to put in there, it will not play, will not work under those circumstances. And if it does, if you do find it, you will know that's a violation of what you have said. So you're giving the digital services the way to communicate directly with the content. The other thing that it enables you to do is to message and keep a history of what happened. So if I sell my work, my 50% of my song to Lou has a digital contract that says this happened at this time, and everyone on the network validates and approves that that's happening. So you can sign your work, you can state what you want to happen, make changes with each other, and effectively the song itself is smart. It becomes skillful. So that when my daughter, my daughter's 5.5, and if you said to her, so I said to her the other day, Izzy, make music play. So she says, Alexa, please play the Moana soundtrack. And she says, please, because you got to be kind to your robot. And music starts playing. Moana starts playing. And I said to her, Izzy, where does the music come from? And she says, Alexa. And I realized she doesn't know what a band is, doesn't know that there's a singer, doesn't know any of that. She just knows that she talks to a box in our living room, and music comes out of it. So what I want you to imagine is this. Today we live in a world where that music is bundled together in 17 different places, a PRO, a label, and all that shit put on the outside. And you've got to hope that the command from Alexa that calls Spotify to play that song, to trigger off this, is getting back to you correctly. You've got to hope that all the machines line up to make that happen. And I got news for you, it's probably not. No matter how good you do it. You do your best, but that's fine. I picture a world in which I'll do this. I'll build my song. I'll say Lou owns 50%. We'll agree to that digitally. It's available for all these uses. But instead of it going through Spotify and everyone else, I want to make it directly available to Alexa. So if you listen to it on Spotify, this is how much you have to pay per stream. If you don't want to pay that, don't have it. If you do, great. So I can say our new song, Lou and I's song, is now a penny per stream for the first 24 hours, and it goes down. The machines just read that and say, yep, penny per stream, got it. So, but I might say, but it's half a penny per stream if you're an Amazon Prime subscriber. Therefore, Amazon's machine is going to go, oh, let's do this because it's cheaper in this way. That way the machine can pay the song, and the song splits the payments out in real time directly. No delay, no latency, and you can watch where this all goes, because what you make, again, is digital gold. What we have today is storing digital gold on a 26-year-old file format. 26 years old. Like, remember phones from back then? Excuse me, let me just. Yeah. And so we thought that by modernizing the format, we would give artists and songwriters in particular a way to digitally encode their rights into their songs. Because we have to allow machines to talk to machines. There's an expression which is that there'll be, in the future there will be people who tell machines what to do and people who are told what to do by machines. And artists are a very unique piece of this. Amazon, Apple, Facebook, these companies would not exist without artists creating what we do. Google's revenue from YouTube, for example, this is music, right? Let's be under no illusion that every cat video has a music underneath it. All this kind of stuff does. So why do we have to be under something that they say? Now what's funny is I've been with the ops teams of YouTube, Spotify, Pandora, all these companies. I know them all. And what's amazing is at the ops teams level, they just want to solve this problem. It drives them nuts that they can't figure out who wrote this damn song. And they've spent $100 million on Content ID trying to figure out how to pay this person. But the existing infrastructure doesn't work. So what Blockchain Project is designed to do is we've developed an open source protocol which allows for the creation of this smart file. And it allows any artist for free to enter their information in, corroborate and validate it with their fellow contributors to it, and release it in a way that is smart. And the hard part is making it free, because how do you convince someone to give you money to hire developers to go build something to give away? We think we've come up with a good way to do that. But effectively, I want to digitally encode the rights to my songs, the rights to the publishing I bought, that I own, etc., into it. And I don't want to have to rely on every third party but myself. And that way, when I choose to make my song smart, I can trade that song in a very, very meaningful way. And I can basically build into every song, here is permission to use my song. And here is the obligation that comes with it. Permission. It could be, use it for free, but I want the cookie for every person that uses it so that I can contact them with advertising later on. Maybe we get the email address, but maybe the cookie. Or you could get, or you could say, they can have it for free in exchange for an email address. Okay, just put that up there. And then so when my daughter says, Alexa, please play the Moana, it'll say, would you like to give your information to the artist in exchange for this track being free? Otherwise it's $1. And she says, what you said. Yes, go. And so all of a sudden, the machine passes the information across. That's what we're building, because if we go into 2020 still using WAV files and MP3s, I will literally shoot myself.
Well, I think for Lou, I'm pretty sure I'm aware verbal contracts are binding, so if he puts out a song, you get 50%. Right?
65, you all heard that, right? Yeah.
Well, thank you so much. If there's time for questions that maybe we could people ask you after,
of course,
in person?
Yeah.
Okay, so we're gonna, yeah.
Benji, on the way down here, you told me about the mission statement that you had. Can you just tell them what your mission statement was?
Yeah.
I think it's really cool.
Yeah, yeah. So I had a very, I had a former person on my board, I'll just say, who didn't like that I wasn't a traditional businessman. So he said to me, that's putting it mildly. So he basically said to me, you need to write a mission statement for your company, for Pledge. And I said, what, like one of those car mission statements, car rental places like this? And he goes, yeah, but like, for real. And I said, okay, why not? If that's what companies need, I'll do that. So I went away, and about a week later, I think I came back, and I was like, here's your mission statement. I don't think you're going to like it very much. And he said, why not? And I said, number one, our job is to get as much money into the hands of artists in the shortest possible time. Any delay is a threat to our business. Number two, because things can be excellent, they have to be. Number three, we're not subject to what was, only to what works. And he looked at me from another planet, but what was amazing was, and this is again just one last aside, and I'm going over, but Spotify is not aligned with your interest as a creator. They're not. They're not evil. Well, maybe a little bit evil now, but they're not aligned. They're aligned to selling subscriptions. What we did at Pledge was bind ourselves as a company to the fate of the artist. If we thought we'd make an artist $5,000, and one of our A&R guys had $5,000 against that artist, and we were at 2,500, we weren't going to make as much money. My accounting was not going to look right. So we were compelled to help the artists make more money. And so what I think is going to happen is what .bc will enable, .blockchain will enable is this. Companies aligned to making that digital asset more money are where you as the artist will focus your attention. So what happened was at Pledge, the more the artists focused the attention on their Pledge profile, the more money they made, therefore the more money we made. And the second thing was this. We mandated that the artists always owned their own data. Email address, phone number. We actually had to do compliance to make sure that this was doable. And the reason was, if I sucked as a CEO and I ran my company into the ground, I did not want to take the artist's information with me. When Facebook died, it took all my fan information with me. So when MySpace, sorry, yeah. Facebook has all my fan information, all of it. I can't get it from them. I can't ask for it from them. In fact, if I write something, they will choose who gets to see it, not me, unless I pay them money for my own data. It's perverse, right? So when you think about the power of what you have, again, return on attention. If I place my attention on this platform, does it give me back money or data? The answer is neither. You're in the wrong fucking place.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And we'll set up for our tech panel. Thank you guys for being here, and thank you, Benji, for sharing.